I had been asking for advice regarding my wife's revelation for 3 days, and sleep was still running from me like a shy gazelle. While I tossed and turned on the clumpy couch at Yusuf's house, the ceiling fan spun slowly above our bed, which was empty. That night kept coming back to me like a broken record every time I closed my eyes. Zichat's voice, which was shaking, confessed her love for Amara. The walls are shadowed by the fragrant candles. That blue dress that Amara wore, which always seemed to catch the light just right, and the way she stood there. I shook my head in an attempt to erase that specific memory. I remembered what she was wearing, but why? Why did I remember the way her perfume blended with the vanilla scent of the candlelight? These thoughts only fueled my anger. I spent the day immersed in my work. The office turned into a place of refuge for me, but memories still encroached. My office echoed with the sound of Amara's laughter when she brought Zichat lunch and stayed to talk while sitting on the edge of my desk. Had I not pretended to be irritated? I was buried in paperwork, but I kept glancing at her eyes to see how they wrinkled when she smiled. I muttered to myself, "Stop it," as I shuffled papers needlessly. My phone was buzzing non-stop with Zichat messages. They all displayed her distress. "Please come home. We need to talk. I never meant to hurt you." I read them all but couldn't bring myself to reply. What would I even say? That I felt betrayed, that I was angry, that sometimes in the deepest part of night I wondered if I was more angry at myself than at them. Amara kept her distance, which both relieved and unsettled me. No more surprise visits to my office. No more running into her at our local market. No more of her infectious laughter filling our home. The silence should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a void, making me realize how much her presence had become part of our lives. Last night, I drove past our house like a thief. Through the window, I saw Zichat sobbing on the couch. Part of me wanted to rush in, hold her, and tell her we could work it out. But then I noticed a framed photo on the wall, the three of us at last year's harvest festival. Amara, in that red dress, rested her hand on my shoulder as we all laughed at some forgotten joke. The memory triggered something I did not want to name. I drove away before Zichat could see me. Yusuf's wife served me breakfast this morning, her eyes filled with questions that she was too polite to ask. The food tasted like ash in my mouth as my thoughts turned to Sunday brunches with Amara, who would come over and cook her special pepper soup. How many signs had I missed? Or had I seen them but turned away? Of course, the community whispered. I overheard fragments of conversations that died as I walked by. Some spoke of shame, while others mentioned how modern times are changing our traditions. Some elderly women clicked their tongues and muttered about foreign influences. I wished their words had made me as angry as they should. Instead, I found myself recalling other occasions. Amara teaching Zichat to dance in our living room, her movements as graceful as a swan. She always seemed to need my assistance reaching high shelves, though she did fine when I wasn't around. The delicate scent of her perfume that lingered in our home long after she had left. Sleep was never easy, but maybe that was a good thing, because in dreams, my thoughts wandered to dangerous places, to questions I wasn't ready to answer, and to feelings I'd buried so deeply that I could almost pretend they weren't there. "He drives past the house every night around 9, Zichat said quietly, stirring her coffee absently. She and Amara sat in the Sweet Aroma Cafe's corner booth, away from curious ears. Last night he slowed down. I could see him looking out the window. Amara leaned forward. "That's good, isn't it? He still cares." "Yes, but..." Zichat pulled out her phone and showed Amara the unanswered messages. "He will not respond, not even to say he despises me." "Then we make him respond another way." Amara's eyes shone with determination. She took out a small notebook. "Tell me everything about his daily routine again." Zichat smiled despite her worries. "Trust Amara to make this a mission." "He leaves for work at 7:30 and always stops at Sarah's corner shop for tea. Lunches at Golden Spoon restaurant from 1 to 2, usually alone. Goes to the gym on Tuesday and Thursday evenings." As they talked, Amara's pen moved across the page. "Perfect," she muttered. They're all opportunities, and you said he still looks at me occasionally. Zichat nodded, recalling how frequently she had caught her husband's quick glances at Amara, and how he would look away too quickly when noticed. He thinks I don't see, but a wife knows these things. We'll need signals, Amara explained, turning to a new page. If I'm with him and you're watching, one touch on my ear means everything is going as planned. 2 touches means abort mission. She demonstrated the movement as casual and natural. They spent the next hour developing their code. A dropped handkerchief would indicate create a distraction. Adjusting a necklace. He's responding well. Running fingers through hair. Help, this isn't working. What about messages? Zichat asked. He sometimes checks my phone when I leave it around. Amara thought for a moment. We'll discuss recipes. How is the pepper soup coming along? Translates to, is he home? Added more spice means he's in a good mood. Too salty means he's angry. They giggled like schoolgirls, but beneath their laughter was nervous energy. This wasn't simply a game, their hearts were on the line. Are you certain about this? Zichat asked immediately, reaching for Amara's hand. If it goes wrong. I've never been more sure of anything, Amara replied. I love you both. We just need to show him that it can work. Each page was filled with plans, the accidental car breakdown near his office, the lift emergency they'd stage, and the ideal moments to orchestrate at the gym. Zichat was aware of his flaws, his protective nature, his secret attraction to Amara, and his tendency to relax after an evening beer. First, Amara explained, we must make him miss me without realizing it. I'll stay away for a week. No visits, no calls, and no random meetings. He already notices your absence, Zichat said with a smile. This morning, he almost asked about you but stopped himself. Perfect. Amara's eyes danced. Then we will start small, a glimpse of me at the market, gone before he could be sure it was me. When I drop off your lunch, he gets a whiff of my perfume. Little things to get him thinking about me. They planned every detail meticulously. Zichat made sure her husband was in the right place at the right time. Amara would play her role, always appearing surprised and slightly flustered during their accidental meetings. Remember, Amara said as they collected their belongings, we're not attempting to seduce him. We are assisting him in admitting what he already feels. Outside the cafe, they hugged goodbye for a longer period of time than usual. As they parted ways, Zichat felt a mixture of hope and fear in her chest. Text me when you get home. Amara smiled. Of course, just remember pepper soup questions only. As her friend walked away, Zichat touched her wedding ring and slowly turned it. Everything can go wrong. However, everything could go perfectly well. She took out her phone and sent their first coded message. Thinking about trying that new pepper soup recipe you mentioned. Do you think he will like it? Amara responded quickly. Trust me, once he tastes it, he won't be able to resist asking for more. When I first saw Amara after that night, I almost dropped my tea at Sarah's corner shop. She was reaching for bread on the top shelf, stretching so that her yellow dress reflected the morning light. I turned to leave, but accidentally knocked over a display of biscuits. Oh, let me help, she said, kneeling beside me to gather the scattered packages. Her fingers touched mine as we both reached for the same packet. I pulled back as if burned, missing the small smile on her lips. Later that day, I couldn't stop thinking about how her perfume lingered in the air around us. Zichat noticed my distraction at dinner. You appear troubled, she said, checking her phone for what seemed like the 100th time that evening. 3 days later, they met again at Golden Spoon restaurant. I was halfway through my jollof rice when Amara entered. She appeared surprised to see me, and her hand flew to adjust her necklace. I didn't know you eat here, she said softly, despite the fact that I'd mentioned it numerous times during our Sunday brunches. Before I could respond, her takeaway order was ready. She left with a gentle "take care," which echoed in my mind throughout the afternoon. That weekend, I saw her at the market. I noticed she was buying ingredients for pepper soup, which is my favorite recipe. Zichat had mentioned craving it earlier that morning. As I attempted to slip away unnoticed, my wife appeared beside me. Oh look, it's Amara. Zichat waved enthusiastically. Was it my imagination, or did she check her watch right before we turned the corner? I watched as they hugged, their gazes meeting over each other's shoulders in an unsettling manner. "Join us for lunch," Zichat proposed. Before I could object, she said, "I'm making your favorite pepper soup." That lunch was torture. Amara sat across from me, her presence both familiar and unfamiliar. She'd brought dessert, the same pastries I always bought from the bakery across town. When I mentioned the coincidence, both women exchanged a quick glance that I couldn't interpret. The chance meetings continued. I'd see Amara jogging past our house just as I was leaving for work, her athletic attire more flattering than necessary for a morning run. She'd be leaving the gym as I arrived, her skin glowing from exertion. Every time, my heart raced traitorously. One evening, I was alone with her in the lift of my office building. "I had a meeting here," she explained, though I never found out with whom. The scent of her perfume in the tight space sent my head spinning. When the lift jerked slightly, she stumbled into me. My hands automatically stabilized her, lingering a little too long on her waist. "Sorry," she said softly, looking up at me through her lashes. The lift appeared to take forever to reach the ground floor. That night, as I entered our bedroom, I noticed Zichat texting, "Soup needed more spice." She quickly deleted it when she noticed me. The following week brought additional coincidences. Amara arrived at the bank just as I was depositing checks. I went to the pharmacy to pick up Zichat's prescription. As I left work early, I found myself outside my favorite lunch spot. She was always perfectly dressed, as if she had been waiting for these chance encounters. Every time, my resolve weakened slightly. Each time I tried to ignore the small details. The new way she styled her hair, the color of her dress, and the subtle changes in her perfume. "I miss our friendship," she said during one of these interactions, her voice carrying a note I couldn't or wouldn't recognize. I did too, but I wouldn't admit it. I missed her laughter in our home, her presence at our table, and her ability to make every moment feel lighter. But I could not tell her that. Instead, I mumbled something about being late and dashed away, attempting not to notice how her face fell. That evening, I overheard Zichat on the phone in the kitchen saying, "Yes, he was there." "No, he barely said anything. Keep trying." When I walked in, she quickly hung up and went back to preparing dinner. "Who was that?" I inquired, trying to appear casual. "Wrong number," she said, but I saw her smile as she turned away. Later, lying awake in bed, I found myself recalling Amara's gentle, "I miss our friendship." The words reverberated in my mind, along with memories of her subtle gestures, careful distances, and perfect timing. It was perfectly timed. Something about it bothered me, but I pushed it away. Some truths were better left unexamined, especially when they caused my heart to race in unexpected ways. There are several reasons why it should not. The car wouldn't start. Amara stood beside her sleek Honda, biting her lip in apparent frustration. Through my office window, I watched her pop the hood, peer inside, then pull out her phone. The afternoon sun made her white blouse almost transparent. I turned away, but not before noticing how it clung to her curves. My phone vibrated, a message from Zichat. "Could you please check on Amara? Her car had broken down near your office. Poor thing has been trying to contact a mechanic." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keypad. Zichat's next message was read, "You know more about cars than I do." The sun was merciless as I walked across the parking lot. Amara's face lit up when she saw me, but something flickered in her eyes. Anticipation. She touched her necklace, a nervous gesture I had noticed recently. "I don't know what happened," she said, moving closer. "It just died." Her perfume, my favorite sandalwood scent, clung to me like a spell. I leaned under the hood, acutely aware of her presence next to me. "Try starting it now," I said. As she slid into the driver's seat, I couldn't help but notice how her skirt rode up slightly. The engine started immediately. "Oh." Her surprised laugh appeared genuine. Maybe it just needed a man's touch. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning, which I tried to ignore. 2 days later, I saw Amara at the gym. She was struggling with weights that were too heavy for her body. "Could you spot me?" she inquired, her workout attire emphasizing every curve. "I usually have a partner, but she cancelled." I knew I needed to say no, but I found myself standing behind her, my hands hovering near the bar while she bench pressed. Each rep moved her closer to me. Her scent had changed and it was citrusy and fresh. It filled my lungs. "Just one more," she inhaled, her voice straining. When her arms trembled during the final rep, my hands brushed against her shoulders, calming her. The contact transmitted electricity through my fingers. Later, in the locker room mirror, I caught myself smiling. I wiped it off quickly. The lift incident was the worst. The maintenance sign appeared just as Amara and I walked in. We had barely begun to move when the car jerked to a halt. "Not again," she said quietly, pressing closer to me in the dim emergency lighting. Her heart was racing, and I could feel it where her back rested against my chest. "I'm sure it'll start soon," I said, my voice husky. Minutes went by. Her perfume, back to sandalwood, filled the small space. Each breath moved me closer to intoxication. When the lift finally moved, she fell back into my arms. Our gazes met in the mirrored walls. Something happened between us, which caused me to quickly step away when the doors opened. The next morning, while watching Zichat make breakfast, I noticed her checking her phone and smiling. She noticed me watching and quickly put it away. But not before I saw the message, "Ready for phase 2. "You haven't touched your beer," Yusuf said. "It was our third late-night talk this week." "I saw them today," I said, "at the market. They didn't see me." "And?" Yusuf leaned forward, "And nothing." I took a long drink, avoiding his gaze. Zichat looked happy. "But that's not what's bothering you, is it?" Yusuf said. "It's not just that your wife looks happy with Amara." "What are you talking about?" "Come on, old friend. I've seen how you look at her, even before all this." "I don't—" The denial died in my throat as memories flooded back. A week later, we sat in Yusuf's garden. I'd just told him about the elevator incident. "And you're angry about this accident?" There was amusement in his voice. "Of course I am. These things keep happening. The car breakdown, the gym, now this. Funny how you remember every detail." He smiled. "The exact perfume she was wearing, how her heart was racing against your chest." I threw a bottle cap at him. "You're not helping." "Tell me something," he said. "When did you first notice Amara?" "Really notice her?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know what you—" "Was it that harvest festival? The red dress?" My silence was answer enough. "Life is strange," Yusuf mused. "Sometimes the things we think will break us actually set us free." "She brought pepper soup to the office today," I said, "for Zichat, but she knew you'd be there." "It was exactly how I like it. Extra pepper, light on salt. Almost like she's been paying attention all these years." Yusuf's eyes twinkled. I thought about all the Sunday brunches, all the times Amara had cooked for us. Had she been watching me even then? Had I been watching her? "You know," Yusuf said carefully, "some men would consider themselves blessed. Their wife finding love doesn't have to mean losing her. Especially if that love brings someone into your life who already fits there so perfectly. If you ask me, I think you're lucky. Many men will consider Amara a bonus, and life goes on." "You make it sound simple." "Perhaps it is. Maybe we're just making things complicated." He filled our glasses. "How do you know? What if something that appears to be wrong is actually correct?" Yusuf was silent for a long time. "When the thing you're fighting against brings you more peace than the fight itself." He took a careful look at me. "Like now, when you talk about both of them, your eyes light up. Even when you believe you are angry. But... I couldn't complete the thought. "Your wife knows you better than you know yourself," Yusuf stated softly, "and maybe Amara always has too." I left his house that evening with more questions than answers. My phone vibrated as I was driving home. A message from Zichat. "There will be a pool party this weekend. Amara is on her way." Sometimes, Yusuf had said, the heart knows what it wants long before the mind is ready to admit it. "Are you sure about this?" Amara asked as Zichat checked the weather forecast again. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "The road to Kapanchan gets dangerous in heavy rain." "That's exactly why it's perfect." Zichat's eyes sparkled. "The road is flooded just enough to look scary, but it is never dangerous. And he always takes that route home." They'd been planning this for weeks, waiting for the ideal conditions. The forgotten files at the office would keep him working late. Zichat sent a text about visiting her mother in Kafanchan. Amara's coincidental car trouble occurred at the ideal moment. When the rain started, everything went like clockwork. Zichat called him first, saying, "I'm at Mama's house. The storm is worsening. Please take care on your way home." 20 minutes later, Amara's car stopped strategically near the low bridge, its hazard lights blinking through the rain. She had carefully chosen her outfit, a white blouse that now held tight to her skin. The roadside emergency kit lay open beside her, indicating that she tried to help herself first. Her heart raced as his headlights appeared through the rain. She hadn't expected to feel nervous as she waved him down. "Amara." He got out of his car right away. "What are you doing out here?" "The car just died," she said, gesturing helplessly at the hood. "I was going to my aunt's. I didn't realize the bridge would be this bad." Thunder cracked overhead, causing her to jump. It wasn't entirely an act. The storm had intensified beyond expectations. The water level at the bridge was higher than they had anticipated. "You can't stay here," he said, stepping closer. "The water's rising too fast." A flash of lightning illuminated his face, and Amara noticed something unexpected: genuine concern. She forgot her practiced damsel routine for a moment, engrossed in his intense gaze. "We need to move your car to higher ground," he explained, already rolling up his sleeves. "The bridge." Another thunderclap, closer this time. Amara stumbled as the wind whipped the rain sideways. His arms grabbed her, strong and sure, pulling her to his chest. She felt his heart pound, or was it hers? "Hold on to me," he said, guiding her through the storm to his car. His hand on her waist felt like fire, despite the cold rain. They worked together to move her car, his hands guiding hers on the steering wheel as he pushed. The water was now ankle-deep, and lightning strobed the scene, capturing tension and shared glances. "You're shivering," he observed once her car was safe. Without hesitation, he removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. His fingers lingered on her collar, adjusting it against the wind. "Thank you," she said quietly, looking up at him through rain-spiked lashes. She could see water droplets on his lips from this close distance. Her phone buzzed, signaling the end of the drama. However, the rising water had elevated this beyond a mere performance. "I can't let you drive like this," he said. "Let me take you home." Amara sent a quick text to Zichat from his car. "Change of plans. The storm is too real." At her door, he hesitated. "You should get inside. Get warm." "Would you—" She started, then stopped. This wasn't in the script. "Would I like some coffee? To warm up?" For a moment, she thought he might say yes. Instead, he stepped back. "I should go. Zichat will worry." Later that night, 3 phones lit up with messages. Zichat to Amara. "Did everything go as planned?" Amara to Zichat. "Better. He really cared." Husband to Zichat. "Found Amara by the bridge. Made sure she got home safe. Storm was bad." Zichat to husband. "My hero." The storm raged on, but inside 3 different homes, 3 people lay awake, replaying a rescue that had started as theater but ended as something real. In her bedroom, Amara still wore his jacket, telling herself it was because she'd forgotten to give it back. At home, he caught himself remembering how she felt in his arms, how her eyes had held his in the lightning flashes. And Zichat, reading everyone's messages, smiled at how perfectly imperfect their plan had worked out. Sometimes the best-laid plans work precisely because they stop being plans at all. "The red bikini," Zichat insisted, holding up the garment while Amara stood before her bedroom mirror. He mentioned once how that shade reminds him of sunset over water. "And make sure to wear your hair down. He stares when you do that." Amara's fingers trembled slightly as she took the swimsuit. "What if this is too much?" "Trust me," Zichat smiled, checking her phone. "I know exactly how he'll react. Just follow my signals." The pool party had been weeks in planning, every detail calculated, from the guest list to the timing to the strategic placement of lounge chairs. I arrived home to find our backyard transformed. Fairy lights strung across the garden, soft music playing, the scent of grilled fish and plantain in the air. Zichat greeted me with a kiss. "Go change," she said. Everyone's waiting. By everyone, she meant our closest friends, couples we'd known for years. And Amara, who was already in the pool, red fabric gleaming against her wet skin, her hair flowing like dark silk in the water. "Remember how to float?" she asked, referring to our lessons from last summer. "I might need a refresher." Before I could respond, she pushed off from the pool's edge. Water droplets sparkled like diamonds on her shoulders, and her skin glowed gold in the late afternoon sun. Zichat appeared beside me and pressed a cold drink into my hand. "You should help her," she said innocently. "You're such a good teacher." She touched her earring once, but I didn't notice the significance. The water felt cool against my suddenly warm skin. Amara swam closer, causing ripples that seemed to pull me in. "Show me again?" she asked, her voice soft enough for only me to hear. My hands found her waist underwater and guided her to float, just as I had last summer. But this time seemed different. This time I noticed how well she fit against my palms and how her breath caught as my fingers spread across her back. "Trust me," I murmured, repeating words from a year before. She settled into my touch, her eyes closing. A drop of water made its way down her neck, and I found myself following it with my gaze. "Marco Polo," someone shouted, breaking the moment. We were soon all playing, but Amara always seemed to find me in the water. During a break, she sat with me on the pool steps, our shoulders touching. "I miss this," she admitted quietly. "How easy things used to be between us." I watched Zichat arrange snacks on the table while pretending not to notice us. "Were they really easier?" I asked, "or were we just pretending not to notice things?" Zichat called everyone for food. As we climbed out, Amara slipped slightly. My arms automatically wrapped around her, pulling her against me. For one hot moment, we stood pressed together, water running in rivulets between us. "Sorry," she said quietly, but she did not leave right away. Zichat suggested swimming races which paired us up. Amara needed help applying sunscreen, and my hands trembled slightly as they moved across her shoulders. She'd brush against me while reaching for a drink, each touch sending electricity through my skin. As the sun began to set, most of the guests left. Soon only the three of us remained, and the water had turned golden red, matching Amara's bikini perfectly. She sat on the pool's edge, feet dangling in the water next to where I floated. "The sunset's beautiful from here," she said softly. "Join me." I knew I should refuse. Instead, I found myself drawn closer by something greater than willpower. Zichat disappeared inside, humming softly. "Your wife's quite the hostess," Amara said, her foot accidentally brushing against my shoulder. "She has a way of knowing exactly what people need." Her hand touched my shoulder, supposedly for balance. My fingers were wrapped around her waist, supposedly to keep her steady. But there was nothing steadying about the way her touch burned against my skin, or the way her eyes locked mine in the dying light. "I should go," she said quietly, but her fingers tightened slightly on my shoulder. "You should," I agreed, but found myself drawing closer, the water gently pressing us together. Time appeared to stop. Her face was inches from mine, and water droplets held onto her lashes. I could feel her breath on my lips and count the small drops of water on her collarbone. One of us moved, or perhaps both, and for a brief moment, I thought. A phone rang inside. The spell broke. Amara stood up quickly, water cascading from her body like liquid gold. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said with a wavering voice. Later, I discovered Zichat in our bedroom, smiling at her phone. "Good party?" she inquired innocently. I couldn't respond. My skin still tingled where Amara had touched me, my hands remembered the feel of her waist, and my body was haunted by her presence. My phone displayed a message. "Thank you for catching me." Again. The storm arrived precisely when Amara walked through our door. I noticed how her blouse clung slightly from the first drops of rain and how she had left her hair loose. The air felt heavy from more than just the approaching storm. "Let me light some candles before the power goes out," Zichat said, moving through the house with practiced ease. Had there always been so many candles? They seemed to be strategically placed, resulting in pools of warm light and intimate shadows. The power failed dramatically, not with a flicker, but with a decisive plunge into darkness accompanied by a crack of thunder. In the sudden blackness, I heard soft footsteps approaching. "I can't see anything." Amara's voice came from surprisingly nearby. Her hand found my arm, fingers wrapping around my bicep. "Guide me?" The beam of my phone's flashlight caught her face inches from mine. Her eyes reflected the light like dark honey, and that familiar sandalwood scent made my head swim. Behind us, I heard Zichat in the kitchen, seemingly busy with tea preparations that involved a lot of movement. We navigated to the living room together, my hand now at Amara's back. Each step felt charged. When thunder cracked again, she pressed closer, her hair brushing my chin. "Remember that game we used to play?" Zichat called from the kitchen, finding objects in the dark. Before I could respond, she was explaining the rules to Amara. One person describes an object. Others have to find it by touch alone. Had she been waiting to suggest this? "I'll start," Zichat said, her voice oddly pleased. "Find the carved wooden bird on the bookshelf." In the candlelight, Amara and I moved toward the shelves. The space was tight, forcing us to reach around each other. Her arm brushed my chest as she stretched upward. I steadied her with a hand on her waist, feeling her sharp intake of breath. "Higher," Zichat guided from somewhere in the darkness. Was she even looking for anything herself? Amara's back pressed against me as she reached up. The scent of her hair filled my lungs. When lightning flashed, I caught our reflection in the window. Her body curved into mine, my hands on her hips, her head tilted back near my shoulder. The image burned into my mind even after darkness returned. "Found it," she whispered. As she turned, the carved bird forgotten in her hand, we found ourselves chest to chest in the narrow space. One of my hands was still on her waist, the other braced against the bookshelf beside her head. Thunder rumbled, but it felt distant compared to the sound of her breathing. "Your turn," Zichat called, making us both start. Had she seen? Did I imagine the satisfaction in her voice? The evening continued like this, moments of charged proximity under the guise of simple games. Finding objects, passing candles, sharing the same blanket when the room grew cool. Each touch felt deliberate, yet somehow natural, as if the darkness gave us permission to forget our usual boundaries. "We should tell ghost stories," Zichat suggested, settling onto the couch with suspicious distance from both of us. The candlelight cast dramatic shadows as Amara began a tale about lost travelers seeking shelter in a storm. I found myself watching her lips move as she spoke, the way her hands gestured in the flickering light. When our eyes met, the story faltered. Something passed between us, electric as the lightning outside. "I need to check on something," Zichat announced suddenly, leaving us alone with the storm and the shadows and all our unspoken words. Amara's story trailed off into silence. In the kitchen, I heard the distinct click of a door closing. "Do you remember?" Amara said softly. "The night of the harvest festival? When the lights went out then too?" I remembered the way she'd felt in my arms, just like now as she stood, extending her hand to me. "Show me again." No music played, but we didn't need any. We moved together in the dark, her head finding that spot on my chest. My fingers traced small circles on her back, feeling her shiver. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. What wasn't? But before she could respond, the lights turned back on. We jumped apart. Zichat returned, watching us with an odd smile. The palm wine caught the evening light, golden in Zichat's carefully chosen crystal decanter glasses. She arranged the bottles with precision, beginning with palm wine and progressing to whiskey, as she had planned with Amara. "Palm wine loosens memories," Zichat had said earlier in the day. "The whiskey brings honesty. He always gets nostalgic with palm wine and truthful with whiskey." The room looked perfect. Traditional music played softly, reminding me of village celebrations, and spicy pepper soup was boiling on the stove. Old photos were scattered carelessly on the coffee table, each chosen to evoke a specific memory. I was already 3 palm wine glasses deep when Amara arrived, rain-soaked and apologetic. She was carrying a bottle of whiskey, my favorite brand, though she pretended the selection was random. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, but the gleam in her eyes indicated otherwise. "Never," Zichat smiled, already pouring another glass. "We were just reminiscing." The palm wine went down smoothly, bringing back memories. I caught myself staring at Amara's throat as she sipped, recalling how she moved at last year's festival, her body swaying like a flame in the dark. "Remember that night?" she asked, her gaze drawn to mine over the rim of her glass. "The festival where the generator failed." The memory flooded back, how we danced in the dark, her perfume blending with night-blooming jasmine, and how perfectly she'd fit against me. I took another drink instead of responding. "More whiskey?" Zichat's voice cut through my memories, but I noticed her watching my expression with carefulness. The whiskey provided a different type of warmth, and we sat on floor cushions, closer than we should be. Stories flowed with the drinks, becoming bolder as the night progressed. Amara's laugh seemed to echo in my chest, and her knee occasionally touched mine as she gestured. Each touch felt calculated yet natural, making my head spin more than the alcohol. "Tell them about the dream," Zichat said abruptly. I had not told her about any dreams. "What dream?" Amara leaned forward. "I don't. However, the whiskey had loosened something. Sometimes I dream about things I shouldn't." "Like what?" Both women were looking at me now, their eyes filled with more than alcohol. Before I could respond, Zichat stood. "We need more ice." She vanished into the kitchen, leaving a charged silence behind. "I dream too," Amara said, moving closer. "About that night in the lift, the storm on the bridge, the pool." Her words hung in the air between us, full of meaning. The whiskey had turned her cheeks pink and made her eyes shine. Or was it something else? "Sometimes," I heard myself say, "when you wear that blue dress." "Yes?" Her hand came across mine in the dim light. "I've noticed," I confessed, "how you appear in it." "I shouldn't, but..." The distinct sound of a phone camera clicking could be heard from the kitchen, but Amara was getting closer, and her perfume was making my head spin faster than the whiskey. "What else have you noticed?" she asked with a low tone. The alcohol had ruined my filters. "Everything. How you laugh. You always sit near me at dinner. Your perfume is sandalwood. Like tonight. The way your hair falls." I paused, realizing how much I had revealed. Amara's smile, however, conveyed understanding rather than shock, as if she knew all along. "More whiskey," Zichat returned, her timing too perfect to be coincidental. Following that, the night became blurry around the edges. More stories, shared glances. Amara's hand lingered on mine while she took a drink. Zichat gives a knowing smile. The music seemed to bring us closer together. "Dance with me," Amara said abruptly, "like at the festival." I knew I should refuse. The whiskey had made everything too honest and raw, but she was already in my arms, swaying to music that appeared to come from everywhere and nowhere. "I've wanted," she said, her lips close to my ear. "What have you wanted?" That was definitely not me. The whiskey asked for me, but Zichat's phone rang, an unsettling reminder of the world outside our whiskey-warm bubble. The moment broke like crystal. Later, as Amara gathered her things to leave, I caught fragments of their whispered conversation. "Did you get everything?" Every word. Perfect timing with the "he never suspected." But the whiskey had made everything hazy and untrustworthy. By morning, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined their words, their glances, the way everything felt both spontaneous and staged. That didn't matter though. The whiskey had revealed truths that could not be reversed. Sometimes wine reveals truths that we've all known all along. Zichat didn't expect the jolt in her stomach that night. The candlelight was her idea. She had placed each flame herself, resulting in the perfect glow. The music too was chosen to foster intimacy. Even the storm outside adhered to her plan. But as she watched her husband dance with Amara in that carefully crafted light, something inside her shifted. His hand rested on Amara's lower back, precisely where Zichat had instructed her friend to guide it. But the way his fingers spread, and the way he drew Amara closer than the choreography called for, were not in their script. It wasn't the soft catch in Amara's breath or the way their bodies swayed together even after the music stopped. "They look perfect together," Zichat whispered. Later that night, she scrolled through photos she'd secretly taken, and each one told a story she hadn't planned. He looked at Amara as if no one was watching. Amara's smile had gone from practiced to painfully genuine, the natural rhythm they'd discovered together no longer following Zichat's carefully planned steps. Her phone buzzed with Amara's message. "Thank you for tonight." It was something I'd never felt before. The message hung unfinished, with the cursor blinking. Finally, "Sleep well." Simple words with complicated meanings. Bringing coffee to his study the next morning, Zichat caught her husband touching the chair where Amara had sat during the storm. His fingers traced the fabric absently, lost in thought. Something in his expression made her step back unannounced. For Amara, reality crashed through their careful plans during what should have been a simple strategy session. "About the beach house weekend," she started, then stopped, fidgeting with her notebook where every move was scripted. "Having doubts?" Zichat asked, watching emotions play across her friend's face. "No, it's just—" Amara looked away. "How he held me through the storm. It was not like our practice runs." "It felt real?" Zichat concluded the statement. "I'm supposed to be acting Z, following the script. But yesterday when he caught me in the elevator," Amara's voice trembled. "I forgot my lines. Forgot everything except how his hands felt, how he looked at me. I'm not supposed to actually—" She buried her face in her hands. "This isn't part of the plan." Zichat reached for her friend's hand, ignoring the slight tremor in her own. Plans change. That evening, watching her husband prepare dinner, Zichat noticed things that both pleased and unsettled her. How he'd set 3 places without being asked, how his eyes kept drifting to the door around Amara's usual arrival time, the way he'd bought sandalwood-scented candles unprompted, Amara's favorite. When the doorbell rang, his smile wasn't part of any script they'd written. It came too naturally, too warmly. Amara entered like sunshine breaking through clouds, her presence filling their kitchen with warmth. She'd brought dessert, his favorite, though they hadn't planned that detail. Watching them move around each other, reaching for plates, sharing glances, Zichat saw her careful plans transforming into something organic and wild, something beyond her control. She recognized the look in Amara's eyes. She'd seen it in her own reflection countless times when watching her husband. Later, drying dishes together, Amara's hands shook as she handled a wine glass. "I should go." "Stay," Zichat said, then realized she hadn't consulted her notebook for that line. In the living room, he played their song, the one from the storm night. He hadn't known it was planned. Now he played it every evening, a habit formed from genuine memory rather than orchestration. That night, Zichat woke to find him standing at the window. "Bad dream?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "Not bad. Kinda good." She knew without asking who starred in that dream. The knowledge brought an ache she hadn't expected, not quite jealousy, not quite fear, but something in between. Their group chat remained active with planning, but the messages had changed. Amara tried typing, "I can't stop thinking about—" The message vanished, replaced by, "Everything's going well." Zichat replied, "Are you okay?" Amara's response took too long. "No." "Yes, I don't know anymore." Sometimes love grew beyond its carefully tended gardens, breaking free to create its own wild beauty. Some stories wrote themselves if you were brave enough to let them. The beach house looked like a dream against the darkening sky, its windows glowing gold in the setting sun. "Everything's ready," Zichat murmured, more to herself than to Amara, who stood beside her in the kitchen. They'd planned everything, a candlelit dinner waiting to be served, wine in crystal decanters, and soft music playing. But something felt different. Their usual synchronized dance had lost its rhythm, giving way to a new tension that crackled like an approaching storm. I arrived just as the first thunder growled across the water. Found them both waiting, Zichat calm and composed, while Amara fidgeted with her dress. The air felt heavy with more than just the coming rain. Dinner began like every other scene they'd orchestrated, yet something had shifted. Zichat's usually smooth direction felt forced, uncertain. Amara's practiced glances carried too much real heat. "Remember our first storm?" With wine boosting her courage, Amara asked, "That night by the bridge, when you needed rescue?" I caught her eye over my glass, watched color flood her cheeks. "Did I?" Her voice carried a challenge. "Need rescue?" We went to the deck, despite the approaching storm. Salt wind tangled Amara's hair, making her appear wild and real. Zichat stood watching us both, her usual confidence trembling as her flawless orchestration began to unravel. "Dance with me," Amara asked abruptly, but not to me, to Zichat. They moved together in the wind, their bodies recalling other dances and storms. I saw them blooming slowly and sweetly, like wine. Thunder crashed closer, the first heavy drops fell. "Inside," I suggested, but no one moved. Instead, they stood in the rain. The rain was tracing silver lines down their skin as they held hands. I was mesmerized by what I saw. Lightning flashed, highlighting their silhouettes, and everything fell into place. Every seemingly random event was carefully planned. The lift that always seemed to break down when Amara and I were in it. The pool party where her red bikini caught the sunlight just right, and the power outages that left us groping in the dark, but always finding each other. These were not accidents. They were all part of Zichat's convoluted artistry. That night, we barely made it to the bedroom, our clothes soaked with rain. Amara's skin tasted of storm and desire, and Zichat's lips were salty with triumph. We stumbled through the door, shedding our wet clothes as laughter blended with the sound of the storm outside. The air in the bedroom contained more than just static electricity. Amara lay back, her hair spreading like dark water across the sheets. I kissed her softly, and her response was enthusiastic and inviting. Zichat watched us with painter's eyes, her hands joining mine as we explored Amara's body. Her sighs filled the room, each adding a note to our growing melody. We moved in a rhythm that appeared choreographed and spontaneous. Amara stands between us, her body bridging two worlds. I felt her warmth, the softness of her skin, and how perfectly she fit against me. Zichat's touch was confident and guiding, with her fingers tracing paths that made Amara's breath hitch. As we became engrossed in one another, time seemed to stretch and compress. Amara's hands rubbed mine, then Zichat's, drawing us closer, our breaths mixing. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one we were creating. We lay together in the aftermath as the rain softened. Amara curled between us, her head on my chest, while Zichat drew lazy patterns on her back. The sound of our breathing filled the room, and the storm outside had subsided into a gentle lullaby. Morning brought the soft light of dawn, and we awoke to find ourselves still entangled. Amara's smile was sleepy and content, while Zichat's gaze was one of satisfaction, believing her plan had worked flawlessly. But I knew better. My feelings for them were not new, but they had finally been given room to grow. Our days became a dance between intimacy and passion. Amara moved between us with grace that reflected both practice and instinct. She knew how to lean into me, how to react to Zichat's touch, and how to combine us into one entity. Zichat watched with pride, believing she had planned every detail, but there were unexpected depths to our relationship. Perhaps that's the magic of it all. An ongoing performance in which everyone believes they have the script, but the real story is written by the heartbeats we share. Our love is not only about the planned moments, but also about the unexpected ones. Every night brings new discoveries, and each day adds layers to our shared story. Let them believe they wrote the ending. Allow them to take pride in a plan that has been executed successfully. Our story, on the other hand, continues to write itself, with each of us playing our parts, but none fully aware of the larger symphony we're creating together. 3 hearts beat in unison, each believing they understand the melody, as love conducts its own perfect, unscripted music through us all.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Tales by Aedyel. Of course, don't forget to share this on your timeline.